Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our September Connect Live. I just want to take the opportunity to thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm delighted to be with you and to be your host for tonight alongside my co-host, who I will be introducing shortly. So whether you're tuning in from within the UK or whether you're tuning in from abroad, whether you're an adult, whether you're a young person, whatever gender you are, thank you for joining, because the topic that we'll be discussing tonight is a topic that's pertinent to us all, whether you're a parent, whether you work with young people, whether you're a young person yourself, an adult. It is absolutely pertinent. And so thank you for joining us tonight. At this time, I'm going to be introducing our co-host for tonight. My co-host is none other than our dear Pauline Miller. Over to you, Pauline.
Oh, thanks very much, Joyce. And can I just first say that it's a pleasure sitting by you, albeit virtually, on this Connect series. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Good evening, all. I'm Pauline Miller from Milton Keynes, GoCop. I've been a Christian for over 3 decades and have enjoyed the journey despite its ups and downs. Married to a wonderful man, Anthony Miller, 3 children, and I'm also a grandmother in waiting. So quite envious of my peers at this moment that have their grandbabies. As Joyce has indicated, tonight is a very sensitive topic that we will be pursuing. And the theme is part of our series of mental health programs that we've been addressing. And the theme is unmasking self-harm. Now, we don't want to make any assumption this evening. So what we've done, the program this evening is going to cover wide, as much as possible in the given time that we have, a range of issues, covering what is self-harm, what does self-harm look like, who self-harms, what's the impact of self-harm on others, what's the role of parents in self-harm, and is this just a phenomena amongst young people? And finally, does self-harm exist amongst the pews? Tonight might be a little uncomfortable for individuals, depending on how close the issue is to you. So you may know that somebody is self-harming, you may have self-harmed yourself. This program is the beginning, we hope, for the church as a corporate body in addressing this topic of self-harm. So if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable throughout this evening, we do have sentient counselling, which is part of a wing of the Church of God of Prophecy. So if you find that you need to, you want to talk to somebody, you can email or you can telephone. The email address is sentient@cogop.org.uk. And there's also a telephone number of 0121 354 8600. So now you know what tonight is about, the different topics we're going to explore. can you do something for us this evening? What we'd like you to do very quickly, maybe contact somebody, send a quick message that this topic's been addressed, drop it in the various chats that you're part of, and let them know we're addressing this sensitive topic. So that'd be great. So let's move on then this evening. We'd like to introduce our panelists, and our panelists consist of 4 professionals who have experience in this field. Our first panelist is Sylvia, and all panelists will take about 3 minutes or so just to introduce themselves and to say who they are and just briefly touch on the area that they're going to be exploring this evening. So our first panelist is Sylvia Lee.
I'd like to say good evening to everybody today, and my name is Sylvia Lee, and I am a therapeutic counsellor, and I am a Christian, and I think I'm just so thankful to God that I've been invited on such an important message regarding unmasking self-harm, which, working with young people as a counsellor, it does seem to be a taboo subject within our churches, and I'm glad that we have this chance to actually talk about this very, very important subject. A little bit about me. I am a married mum of 3, and I've got 1 grandson as well. And today, I'm hopefully going to be covering like what is self-harm, and is there an actual link between self-harm and suicide, and how would we actually approach someone who is self-harming, and also is there a particular age group that self-harm, and I'm sure that these topics will be picked up by most of the panelists as well. So I just look forward to the evening and our discussion.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'd like to now introduce to you Dee Young.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dee Young, and I'm a member of the Church of God of Prophecy in Bedford. I thank God for this opportunity to discuss a pertinent topic and to raise the awareness within our community of self-harming behaviours and what it looks like. I have about 17 years of experience working with children and families in a variety of settings. I'm currently employed as an independent senior social worker, and I'm also a mental health first aider for children. Tonight, I'll be sharing a few scenarios to raise awareness of some of the behaviours amongst children and young people. Over the years, I've noticed that there is a rapid growth of the number of self-harming cases amongst my caseload, and I will be delighted to share some of those with you. I will be, because of confidentiality, I will not be naming names, so it will all be confidential. Thank you. Over to you, Pauline.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Next, we're going to move over to hearing from Carl Barge, who has kindly joined us for this evening.
Thank you, Joyce. It's so wonderful to be with you all this evening, and such a powerful topic to really discuss this evening. I was so delighted and felt privileged to be asked to join the panel this evening. Having worked in a prison for 14 years, my experience has been varied, but I think from my perspective, or from a man's perspective, working in a men's institution, I think some of the issues have been. I think they need to be demystified. I've seen, young as well as old men who suffer with self injury, self harm. As a Christian man, I'm a lay minister at COCOP, New Day Christian Center, for 5 years now. And it's just a blessing to be a part of a family-oriented church. Married for over 15 years now, and two daughters. And I want to shout out my grandson, who's 15 months, Caleb. He's such a joy, such a personality, I might add. But yes, looking forward to the discussion this evening. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you. And we're delighted to have you as well. Last but not least, we have Fiona Beckford.
Good evening, and thank you, Joyce. Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be joining you this evening, together with my peers, to be able to discuss with you and to share and to really explore what self-harm is and how it impacts people. I am an integrative and relational psychotherapist and have been practicing for over 25 years. I've worked in various different settings. So I've worked for an employee assistance program where I've supported members of staff who have predominantly been traumatized through their lines of work, and some have unfortunately gone on and self-harmed. I've also worked for many years in private practice where I've worked with individuals, couples and families. I've also worked within the NHS, predominantly in two main areas. One was in CAMHS, so that stands for the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, working specifically with teenagers from the age of 13 to 17 who've experienced a wide range of mental health issues, and some of which have included self-harm behaviours. And also in child development team, working specifically with very young babies and toddlers, so from the age of 0 really up until the age of 6, who once again have displayed some really maladaptive behaviour, and supporting parents particularly with that type of behaviour, and showing them, looking at different ways in which they could work and communicate with their children. I attend an apostolic church, Word of Faith Centre, and have been a Christian for 15 years, and I've enjoyed my walk with the Lord, and predominantly really enjoyed writing. I have written several in books, and enjoy being able to share the knowledge that my experience has awarded me. So I'm really looking forward to exploring and sharing with you this evening and seeing where our discussion goes. Back to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Fiona. And we are privileged to have the calibre of panelists here tonight who will be working with us and sharing their experience from a topic that we don't talk about much. And as Pauline said, what about what's happening? We could shy away from this as a church. We could shy away from it as people of faith and sweep it under the carpet and pretend it doesn't impact on us. But actually, we're not here for that. We're here to tackle the difficult subjects, the hard subjects, and be here to help and to support in whatever way we want. And that's what we want tonight to be informative, but also to be uplifting, and that people go away with ideas and approaches for how they can either be signposted or be supported. So Pauline and I are shortly now going to be sharing the results of a survey that our National Youth Director kindly put out for us. So she sent out a survey of a number of questions to our young people. So you could say it's a snapshot survey asking some key questions about self-harm. And we will shortly now be, Pauline will be, and I will be sharing the outcomes of that. It's important that we hear the voice of our young people, but not only hear the voice, but respond to their questions. And that's what we want to do. And I want to take the opportunity before Pauline joins me to thank our National Youth Directors, Rachel and Dwayne McCoy, and to thank all of the young people and the youth directors who have participated in this survey. And we want to support you in whatever way we can. So Pauline's going to join me, and we're going to be presenting the survey. Hi, Pauline. Great to have you. I thought I was going to be on my own then.
No, I'm still here. Yeah, I like what you said. The panelists might not represent the next generation in terms of age and what have you, and don't take that too personally, panelists, but it would be remiss of us if we didn't have the voices of our young people and what our young people were saying about this subject, or not saying, as the case may be, so in certain respects. So I'm going to ask our technician if you could start with the first slide. And just to sort of give you an overview, the survey was done in a qualitative and quantitative format. So we have some statistics initially, and then we have some narration comments, which Joyce will highlight some of the points from there. So I'm going to start off with the actual statistics in terms of what our young people were saying and who was saying what. So participants from this survey, we can see a breakdown. The majority of those that completed the survey, and it's worth pointing out that we appreciate that this survey may not be a representative of all our young people. So we accept the fact that they could fundamentally be a different picture if the survey went broader. So the majority of our young people that responded were from 13 to 18, followed by the 18 to 32, and so forth and so forth. Can we have the next slide? No. So one of the questions that we asked, do you know what self-harming means? And the majority responded positively. Slide question 3. How old were you when you first came across this term? If we look at the under 12s, there's a significant number of under 12s that are aware of this social phenomena. Then the biggest age group, which represents those that responded, were 12 to 16, followed by 17 plus that became aware, which was 15% of those that became aware of self-harming. Next slide, please. Where did you learn about self-harming? This is quite positive, I think, because the majority of respondents, it appears, learnt about self-harming in a safe environment, i.e. through teachers, we're assuming that it's safe through teachers and parents. So that's quite positive. And then we've got social media and the internet that follows, and also 15% heard through friends. So that's a positive, I think. Can we have the next slide, please? Do you know someone who has self-harmed? Well, that speaks for itself. People are aware of this. And the next slide. Would you speak to someone in church about it, about self-harming? This is quite telling, isn't it? 60% of respondents said they would not speak to somebody in church about it. Now, I appreciate there's some issues around that, reasons why they wouldn't, but is that something that as a people, corporately, we need to address? Do we create an environment where young people or the respondents from this survey feel comfortable raising the matter in church? But there's still a significant number that feel comfortable that the church provides an environment where this issue can be addressed. Now, Sister Joyce is going to look more specifically at some of the narration that was coming out from more to do with the views that young people were making. So, Sister Joyce?
Thank you, Pauline. We're going to move to slide 8, or question 7. This question is answered over the next 3 slides, so I'm not going to go over all of them, but it's interesting for those of you who can read this. The question is, what advice would you give to someone thinking about hurting themselves? And most of the responses that came up were really positive. People were being really responsible in terms of the sorts of things that the advice that they would give. And I'll just, an example is, you're worth so much, don't allow your feelings to trick you into hurting yourself. You are lives, despite what pain you have expected in life, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So the get help. Don't you know that you're God's creation? If there's an issue going on and you don't know what to do, they should speak to a trusted adult or speak to someone that they can trust. Next slide, please. I'm just giving you a flavour of the sorts of things that came back, and then we're going to go into the questions. It's hard when you're looking from the inside out and going through it yourself. Your thoughts and your mind may feel like it's having a hold over you, but I pray that God's love for you will remind you. However, I feel like it's not as easy as that. But in terms of general advice, having someone to speak to, being able to build a rapport with them, providing a safe and secure space for them to be empathetic and non-judgmental, and just as simple as listening to them helps. Also, not just throwing insensitive terms such as, oh, you'll be fine, or just try to avoid it, or even in a religious context, in terms of disregarding it, it's just a phase or something that can just be cured. And I think that comment is really telling. So there are, the next slide, please. Quite a few different comments. talk to someone. Again, love yourself. There's better ways. Speak to someone. Don't harm yourself. Pray and access therapy. So I think we seem to have had a collection of very positive statements coming through. What we wanted to put to our panelists really were some of the questions that came from. So if we go to slide 11, the questions that we asked that, if there's one thing you'd like to know about self-harm, what would it be? And there's a range of questions that we really want to put to our panelists, because this is what the people that answered the survey are young people. Why do people self-harm? What makes you get to that point of hurting yourself? Why is that the first thing that comes to young people's mind? At what point is self-harm taken seriously? Is self-harm spoken about in the church? The implications of social media regarding the intricacies of the exposure to mental health, but also the awareness of mental health, mental ill health. Is there a balance in social media, or is it fixed as a negative connotation? So there are questions about mental health. Are we doing enough? We're talking about it enough. And also, does mental ill health increase in churches due to the unrepresented nature of younger generation not talking about it? So we really want our panelists to answer some of these questions. And the second lot of questions, I think I just want to quickly dip into that as well, because we will come back to these on the next slide, is about, again, are we just taught to pray in church about mental health? Self-harm can be perceived as a way of escaping from the world, but at what point is it taken serious, or how can people reach out if their only escape is self-harming? I hope the panelists are taking notes, because we're going to answer a few of these questions before we move on. What do people get from it? Does hurting yourself numb you in some way? How does it stop? And is it just younger people, or does older people self-harm? So I think if we could, and as we are discussing the questions, I really want to, we're going to just share a slide now. So if there's anyone watching, because it can be quite triggering, Pauline has already shared with us that we have counsellors on board waiting. If there's anyone that really needs to speak to someone, we shared a email and a telephone number, and it's coming up on the screen right now as I speak, and we will be scrolling this across periodically through the program, so that anyone who needs to speak to someone, and we do have please don't use the telephone number, but use the email address. There is someone sat at their email listening and waiting for an email, and then they will take your number and ring you back and speak to you. But this is the telephone number during working hours during the week. So thank you very much for that. And there are other self-help and organisations out there that can support you, and we'll share that at the end of the programme. So we're going to go back to the whole panel, the whole screen now, and trust that most of you caught some of those questions. But I want to go back to, we're just going to share a couple of those questions, and we're just going to open them up to the panel. Why do, I think, Sylvia, I know you were going to share what is self-harm, and maybe you could incorporate this question, why do people self-harm?
Okay. Well, what is self-harm? It is a behavior. It's not an illness. It's an act of deliberately harming your own body in such a way, like cutting, burning, scratching. There's so many different ways that this is done. It is a harmful way to cope with emotional distress, intense anger, frustration, anxiety, and even working with some young people in counselling. It will go as far back as primary school, a comment that was said, and they've internalized that, and it's sort of like grown. So it started way back when. So everybody's unique, everybody's different, that self-harm. So you can't exactly say exactly why one particular person has self-harm, because it might be different from somebody else. And the self-harm, it brings a sense of momentary sense of calm and a release of tension. But it's usually followed with guilt and shame, and then the whole process then begins again. It's almost addictive. For young people that have been, for people that have been abused when they were children, sometimes they're not even aware that they're actually harming themselves. It's almost like a disassociation. And I've worked with young people that has actually happened as well, where they're actually harming themselves to a point where it's got really bad, and then they're sort of like snapped out of this trance-like state to realize that they've actually harmed themselves. There's also the biological term to this as well, where when you continue to do this, it seems to get easier. The only thing I can say is like somebody plucking their eyebrows, and it hurts at first, but the more they do it, there's almost a sense of enjoyment or fulfillment from this. But for a lot of people, it is a sense of that overwhelming sense of stress and distress that they feel that they can't really talk to anybody about. So it's and that's how they actually deal with that. I don't know if I've answered all of that, or
No, thank you very much. Thank you
okay.
very much. And Pauline is going to follow up with some questions.
Contextualizing, I think, Sylvia, self-harm. You mentioned that from what I hear, it seems like self-harming is almost like a coping strategy,
Yes.
a coping mechanism. Do you want to just elaborate on that a bit?
Because there's a sense that they're unable to manage. They don't think anybody's listening to them, so they're actually sort of like it could be punishing themselves as well, punishing that they're not good enough, about self-esteem, self-worth, and it just builds up, especially if they're internalizing this. They're not speaking to anybody about that, and it does bring that sense of relief, temporary release for them. They feel the pain that they're feeling in the cutting is not. It feels not as bad as the pain that they're actually feeling on the outside. So this pain is not as bad for them.
Right, thank you. And the other term that we use for self-harming, I know it's been sort of medicalised, hasn't it, in that it's got an official definition, And one expression is that non-suicidal self-injury. Now, is there a link between self-harming and suicide? I guess the question there is, you've explained what self-harming
Yeah,
is, isn't it then?
yeah, yeah. People who self-harm are at an increased risk of suicide, but self-harmers are not necessarily wanting to commit suicide. They tend to it's a cry for help, really. They're calling out for help. But when they continue to have this type of behavior, there is a higher risk that they could take their own lives, because sometimes it goes a little bit too far. Now, what we find is that people that have ended their lives, they sometimes they have a history, of self-harming. But research has shown that maybe about 1% of those who do commit uh, do self-harm may actually commit, end their lives, because it sort of like crosses over, because self-harm is like an act of survival and not necessarily a final act. It's about trying to survive. So when factors like stresses and breakdown, and I mean, even support networks sort of like are removed, they become more fearless and very disconnected. And that's when it could actually cross over, into maybe suicidal thoughts. But most self-harmers are not really going to commit suicide. It's a cry for help. But I have known that it has gone quite far where lives have.
Yeah.
Right,
Paul,
right. And you mentioned the expression disassociation, which I believe is some sort of disorder. Um, do you want to just elaborate a bit more on what is disassociation in regards to self-harming?
Yeah. For some young people, they almost go into, they're so stressed, and for what's happening to them. And I spoke to one of my clients who's at uni, and I think she harmed herself. I think it was about 50 times. It's almost in a trance, like she's not even realizing what's happening. And when she actually realized, I think she was a bit shocked herself. And it's so, when I say dissociation, it's like they're not realizing actually what's happening, but it's actually happening. She's actually doing it, and it was about 50 times that she'd actually harmed herself. So that's a mean dissociation. You're not quite there, but they're continuing to do, to self harm at the same time. Hopefully,
Right.
that maybe I've explained it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. It's escapism, isn't it? And I think one thing that's quite key that's come out of what you said is that it's intentional as well for some people. They
Yes,
deliberately set out to
yes,
self-harm.
yes.
Yeah,
And they'll find whatever they need to actually self harm hidden, put away, because their intention is to do. Even if they're feeling no, some they may be feeling okay, but just in case they've got something put down, ready to self harm. So
right.
yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
Right.
wonder, I wonder if I
it's
could
addictive.
Sorry?
I just wondered whether I
Yeah.
could interrupt you with a
Yeah.
follow-up question, and this just open to others, because I can see I don't want anyone disassociating themselves tonight. But one of the questions from the young people was, self-harm can be perceived as a way of escaping from the world, but at what point is it taken seriously, or how can people reach out if their only escape is self-harming? And I just wondered what anybody else had to say about that, because um, we heard in the news recently, a dear young girl, 14-year-old Molly Russell, ended up taking her life. And she was on Twitter, and she had accounts that her parents didn't know about, and she was on self-harming sites. They were popping up. I guess there's lots happening with young people at the moment, and we know there's been lots of referrals just to child and adolescent services. But at what point does, I'm just trying to reflect this question from a young person, is it taken seriously? As in, okay, they're self-harm, we're managing it, but is it going, I think they're trying to say, if it's turning into something that where it could become, it could be a suicide attempt or something like that. Where do you draw the line? Yeah. I'm just trying to reflect what the question that's come from a young person. Anyone wants to take that?
I think if the thought is there from a young person, as soon as that thought is there, then really they should be trying to speak to somebody. So right from, don't wait until it's got so far, because then you're getting into a vicious circle. But if those thoughts are going in, through your mind, talk to somebody, and speak to someone, whether that's your youth leader, whether that's a parent, whether that's a teacher, whoever. But if those are the thoughts that are going on, I would start from there.
Thank you, Paulie.
Wanted to add to what Sylvia's comprehensive reflection. Anybody else?
I think by definition, self-harm is something that tends to be done in secret. There is something quite secretive about the practice, about the behavior, which then makes it quite difficult for people to then want to reach out and share what's going on for them, because then they may have to disclose that they're self-harming, and then there may be judgment. And then it's not just the judgment on the behavior of self-harming, there's also possibly the potential for judgment behind what's fueling the self-harm. So if, for example, somebody has experienced an invasive trauma, then maybe having to talk about that as the reason as to why they're self-harming could be really off-putting. And I think maybe that really speaks a lot around the results that we saw from the survey, when the young people that had been spoken to said, 40% would speak to somebody in the church, but the majority wouldn't. So there's something, I think, around just kind of recognizing that whilst the ideal would be that particular young person find somebody to talk to in the church. Ideally, that's what we would like. As Sylvia said, the reality is that may not happen. So just finding someone to talk to is key. And it doesn't have to be face-to-face. Once again, that's the ideal, because you pick up on social cues and body language and tone of voice. But if there is an online portal where you feel comfortable being able to talk about what's happening to you, and maybe remain anonymous and just share what's going on for you, it's the interaction with another human being that's going to help in releasing some of those really overwhelming feelings, which is what's causing that person to self-harm in the first place.
Thanks very much for that. Carl, were you going to say comment?
No, I was going to really agree with what has been shared by Sylvia and Fiona, and just thinking that there's no set way that someone takes the decision to to self-harm or have self-injury. It's quite often they're different manifestations. I know that I've worked with men who have tried to, they've only shared it with me. And you know, it's been a real secret. There's been a lot of shame and guilt around them doing it to themselves in the first place, whether they started it outside of prison or when they've just come into prison. As well as that, there are those who have done it, but they do it openly. They've waited for someone to come to a cell door, or they've been unlocked out of their prison cell and they've come out onto the landing and started cutting themselves or burning themselves. All manner of things, and as Sylvia alluded to, it is quite often a cry for help. But at the same time, it's that release quite often that has been communicated and it's felt. It's a felt sense. I would say that, you know, yes, it is about asking for help. But the things quite often is that they are, if you haven't had if your needs have constantly been unmet, then it's quite difficult to ask for help and put yourself out there, because as I often say to students, is that our clients are looking for us to replicate that which went before. And then once they get that confirmation, it makes it that much difficult for them to ask for help in the first instance.
Is it a misconcept then that it's just a young person thing?
I would no, I would no, not at all, not at all. It's for in my own private practice, as well as I've mentioned, you know, working in across different platforms. I would say that it's a range. There's too many different variables to put your finger on just one thing that how it manifests itself. It's too many variables for me to say. I do know that, you know, again, you know, Sylvia mentioning, you know, the neurobiology of it, you know, the amygdala and how and how it becomes, you get better and better and better at it, and then it reduces that felt sense that, oh, it feels good to do this. I get so much relief from doing this. But then it's okay. How do we work with that person to
Yeah.
unlearn those behaviors? And I believe that's key.
Right, thank you.
Mm.
There is
I think
one. Sorry, Joyce, over to you then, is it?
no. Go ahead, Pauline. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh dear, I can talk for England, I think, folks. There is one question that I'd like to maybe start off with Sylvia and then open it up to the panel. The question is, how much is this an issue amongst the pews? How much is self-harming an issue in the church?
Mm.
Working as a counsellor, the amount of clients that we're getting coming through to talk about this issue. And when we ask them, oh, why are you not talking to members of the church? Because, oh, no, because they feel that they're going to be judged as well. But I'm talking about young people, musicians. I'm talking about people on your worship team. I'm talking about
Mm.
people that are coming to Sunday school as well. And but the amount, I mean, this is going across the board, not any particular church, but on a whole, we're getting a lot of young people, especially young people, coming through that are actually self-harming because they feel they want to be in a safe environment where they're not feeling judged at all. So it is it's a bigger problem than what we actually think. And most of the young people know another young person that is actually self-harming. I mean, some young people might just self-harm maybe a couple of times, but some it becomes habitual and it's becoming a problem. But it's not just outside of the church; it's right under our noses, and we need to sort of look at how are we presenting this to allow that young people will actually come as the first point of call and to come to the church for us to support them. But at the moment, I said the list is long of people that are coming from the churches seeking help outside of church. So so that's so I'm glad you asked that question.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else that would like to elaborate further or add to?
I would just say that in order for, if we really want young people in the church to share more of what they're going through with us, then we need to create an environment that allows them to do that. If communication between the older members of the church and the more mature members of the church isn't there in the here and now, if those relationships are not being built, if we're not taking time to sit down with a young person after church and just have a 5-minute chat with them, how's school, how's college, how's uni, how you doing, if we're not inviting them back to our homes for dinner, if the relationship isn't there, they're not going to come and talk to us about something really sensitive like self-harm or something that they're struggling with. It's just not going to happen. So we have to go back to basics, and it's all about the relationships. I remember back in the day when I was a young person, kind of being dragged to church. There was a kind of core group of the mature elders, as we called them, and we would go to their homes for dinner after church, and they would sit and talk with us. And it was just those 1 and 2 families who had children who were my age that I would connect with, and to this day I still have those connections. So we have to create an environment for young people to feel safe enough to come and share with us. They're not just going to pick up one day and think, do you know what, I'm going to talk to somebody about this, if that connection or that relationship doesn't exist.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I think tonight is also about, as well as raising awareness, I think there's a safeguarding element here. Now, Region 2 recently put on a safeguarding training, and I believe, first name escapes me, Sister Reed did an excellent presentation about safeguarding. And I walked away from that training thinking that safeguarding is not just for a particular setting, but safeguarding should be something that we have our eyes on throughout our lives, whether at home, in the church, in our workplace, when we're out and about. Safeguarding is everybody's business. Now, we have Dee here with us, who is a trained social worker, senior practitioner. Dee, can you elaborate a bit for us on the role of parents in all of this?
Yes, I think as parents, it is a secret. Self-harming is a secret activity amongst children. So it could be going on, and the parents are oblivious to this. I think it's important that if the parents find out about their children self-harming, the first thing to do is not be judgmental. To approach this, it could be devastating, but it's important to let the child know that you are there for them and that you acknowledge their feelings, relate to them as a whole person, not just their self-harming. It's important to have empathy and understanding about what they're doing. But let the child be in control of their decisions. I think that's very important. Some parents do not want professional help for their children, and they feel that they can manage it at home. And that can be done. I think first and foremost within the church community, prayer, that's the most important thing, to put God first, put God into this, pray and believe that he can help. But also there are strategies that could be employed, such as distractions. I know of one case in a church where a child was cutting her wrists. The parent found out, and what they did, the child wasn't able to elaborate on what she's doing, but they came up with a code word. So if the child felt that they wanted to self-harm, they would use the word lemons or text a message to her mum to say lemons, and then the mum instantly knew that they needed to support this child. One of the things that they employed was they put a rubber band was put onto her wrist, and the child would snap the rubber band onto her wrist instead of cutting. So that was a less invasive way and more for the child to still get that sensation. Or they would try to do things like go for a walk, put music on, and just do anything that the child would enjoy doing to try and take her mind away from the pain that she was feeling. If a parent decides that they do want professional help, there are many organisations that can assist. A GP is a good point of call, to go to the GP and ask for counselling. We mentioned safeguarding within the church community as well. There may be Christian counsellors within the church that could help as well. So that's offering to help them and support them.
Thank you very much. You made a statement, Dee, relate to the young person as an individual and not as a self-harmer. And that kind of resonates with me in that it gives the young person autonomy. It means that we respect the individual. They're not, the self-harming doesn't define them. I remember I grew up in an era where I was told, is me banyo and my house, not in my house. Now, we've shifted a whole lot from that. Sorry, if there's anybody on air that doesn't understand that, maybe somebody can translate for you a bit later on. But there's been a shift now, isn't there? And I really like that statement, relate to the young person as an individual and not the self-harming. And that's reinforcing that we respect them for who they are. And do you know something? It's not a reaction response, it's a response, it's a measured response. Now, do parents come ready-made with all these skills today, knowing how to broach a subject with this subject with their young person?
No, but I think forums such as this are raising awareness, and I think that within the church maybe there could be more activities like this where we could talk about it. Self-harming is not a topic that is discussed in church. It's something that's secretive. So parents don't know where to go. They don't know who to talk to. They try to manage it by themselves. But I think it's about educating, self-awareness, giving parents tips that they could, for instance, when we have women's groups at church, it could be discussed then, or it could be discussed even at youth club as well, and so forth. But when I said relate to the whole person, what I was also referring to is it's about focusing on the positive aspects of the child in order to build up that child's confidence. Because oftentimes when children are self-harming, they're feeling very low in mood and they can't see anything positive. It's all negative for them. But by focusing on the positive, that child will gradually realize that they themselves, there's much more to them than the negative feelings that they're feeling.
Who has questions for Paul and Fiona. Just want to remind viewers that the Sentian number is running across the stream, or the email address, sorry, is running across the stream. We're all in the business of safeguarding. If you want to talk to somebody about maybe your own personal experience or maybe something you've witnessed, please reach out to somebody. And tonight isn't about making everyone experts in this. It's about raising awareness and empowering you to support someone by being a referral agent. But we're not saying to you where this session is about making you, turning you into professionals. People spend years training in this area. So we're hoping that if it is getting a little uncomfortable for you, that you can reach out to someone through our counselling service. Thank you, Sister Joyce.
Thank you, Pauline, and for those questions that you've just asked. I think they've been really, really insightful, and thank you for those who have responded to some of those questions. And I think they actually reflect some of the questions that have come from our young people as well. I just wanted to direct a couple of questions to Carl initially, but of course any of the other panelists can join in. And how do you know, if I'm a parent, for example, if I'm a youth worker, or what do you look out for? What are the kind of, are there factors that are associated with self-harm and self-injury? Are there particular characteristics of someone who self-harms? What do you look out for? What are the things that might be telltale signs? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. It's they're it's unlimited. I believe the characteristics that are out there in regards to self-harming, and I think a few have already been mentioned. But what I've seen and experienced in my own practice, it would be the young person or older person would strongly dislike. There is a pattern of invalidating themselves, or possibly quite hypersensitive to rejection. It goes without saying that the anger that is experienced is definitely been internalized, and as a result that anger could then be projected onto others. But it's, quite often it really is at themselves. And then, the oxymoron of the situation is that then they then tend to suppress their anger. Aggression is quite common. Acting impulsively, and then having really not having any control over that impulse to act. And I think Sylvia alluded to this, that tendency to act in accordance with their mood, the mood of the moment, and not really planning for the future. The Also just considering the mental health, ramifications, depression, comorbidity. My area of expertise, I would say, was drug and addiction for many years, and then as a result of that, there is that dual diagnosis, chronic anxiety, and they don't really see themselves as being skilled at coping. I think that's that's enough. I think because there's so many things that could be talked about in relation to characteristics. But what I will say, and picking up on what Fiona mentioned, it would be the relationship. And quite often within therapy, we talk about the relationship being the therapy, and
Yeah.
outside of that, if we're not fostering relationships with people, they don't have to be your clients, but it's about fostering relationships that are deep and they're meaningful, and that they feel that you have some type of agency towards them. Yeah. So I'll leave it there.
I think that's just reflecting, Carl, on what you've just shared there around anxiety and so many
Mm,
things that's happening for young people, schools, colleges, and we've just come out of 2 years of COVID, and
mm,
we saw m- mental health and depression, anxiety affect lots of people, not just young people.
yeah.
So,
Yes.
it had a huge impact. The fear of COVID and catching things, and
Mm,
it's led to more anxiety, children having to do schoolwork in a very
mm,
unusual environment, and so forth.
mhm,
And the other element that sometimes you can see associated is eating disorders as well. So,
mm,
you know, um, at what point, I mean, where do you go if you're a parent or a youth worker, and what would you do, if you saw someone? And
mm,
thank you for some of the tips that you shared, because I thought some of those examples that you gave of the elastic band and so on. Carl, you work in a different environment, and sometimes we
mm.
associate self-harm with women, young women,
Yes.
but
Mm,
you work predominantly with young men, and to
yeah.
share with us what the strategies and approaches that you might use.
Well, it was quite often it is getting into that person's that person's frame. So it's quite often I like to know how a person learns, and then once I'm able to ascertain how they learned, and quite often we have to reckon that there was quite high levels of illiteracy within the prison system or the prison estate. And once I'm able to talk to that individual in their learned language, and psychoeducate them around perhaps what it is they are experiencing, and a lot of things within their mind and within their soul has been undiagnosed. So and we're not in the business of diagnosing anyone or pathologizing, or me pathologizing the men that I work with, but quite often it was something that was undiagnosed. That putting them in front of the right person in order to get their needs met, the needs met, and once they were able to identify, well, this is what is going on with me, and this is what is triggering me to participate in this behavior. Quite often that was a step in the right direction. We know that not all of these various ways work with everyone, but I found that once you are able to talk to a person and sit them down and perhaps give them different tools, different strategies, techniques in order to help themselves, then I've had I would say I've had some success in doing that. But I've also come to find out that some they when we talk about this self concept of how a person sees themselves, their self esteem, their self worth, how they that ideal self of how they communicate to the world. It is quite common for them to say, well, I can't be helped. I can't be helped. But if you're able to show them that you don't see them as they see themselves, then again, that's another way of helping them to get some sense of self, that I am worthwhile, that I am redeemable, so to speak. So that's some of the things that I've used over the years with the men that I've worked with. And as you say, self-harm is no respecter of age, no respecter. So
Right, right.
I've had the 18-year-old, and I've had the man in his late 60s, early 70s that self-harmed. And it was something that for some it was the first time, and for others it had been a lifetime of doing it. But quite often it was that dual diagnosis that was in effect. That we were able to work with them and give them those strategies to help themselves.
Mm, mm. Could you just give us an example? Because the question I got was, what ways could psychotherapy and counselling help to facilitate change? But just thinking about listeners that are listening tonight, or
Mm,
will listen to this on playback, and there might be a parent, there might be a youth worker, there might be just a friend of someone who they
mm,
know is self-harming. And as Pauline
mm,
said, this we're not teaching people to be experts here. This is not what this
mm,
program's about. We want to signpost, we want to raise awareness. But what would you say to a parent that's listening, a youth worker, someone in church
mm,
that's working with young people?
mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I would, Joyce, I would reiterate what I said earlier, and Fiona mentioned it as well. Last count, within the counseling and psychotherapeutic world, there are over 500 different modalities. And all of them perhaps have their place, but we come back to the relationship. When you first sit in front of someone, it is being able to see them.
yeah,
It's being able to, whatever is going on for you, get out of the way and see the
right.
person in front of you and listen to them. Listen to what they have to say, because quite often they don't feel they have a voice. So once you're
Mm,
able to foster, and it takes time, I would say that some services they're not able to offer more than six sessions. But I think that if you can get them in front of someone that can listen for those six sessions, it's a start. It's a start. And then being able to signpost them to somewhere that maybe they can have open-ended therapy, or forming relationships that don't necessarily have to be in a therapeutic form. But as you
mm,
say, there are other agencies out there that we can perhaps signpost that young person or that older person to, in order for them to get the help that they need.
mm, mm. No, thank you, Carl. And I'm just reminded of what Fiona said, and it's demonstrated from our surveys that um, you know 100% of the respondents knew what
Mm,
self-harm was, and a
absolutely.
significant amount of them knew someone who was
Mm,
self-harming. the church, but we've talked about finding someone that they can trust, whether it's online, whether it's even in an anonymous way, so that they can reach out for support. And I guess the question I would be asking, the fact that we're here tonight means that we're starting to have the dialogue and have some of those very, very, very important conversations. And as uncomfortable as it might be, but we're not under any illusion, and we're not shying away from this topic as a church. And our young people need to know that we're here to support them, and we want to work with them. So I just wanted to direct my next question to Fiona. Yes. Fiona, I'm just going to put a scenario to you. Yeah. So you've noticed several times around the house, which seems odd to you, or a parent has noticed, and it seems odd. They've not been able to identify why they're there. These items include bloody pastas, bloody tissues, and a razor blade. Later on, you discover a family member is self-harming. How would you respond? How should we respond? So yeah, please. There are a couple of options. I keep hearing a little tweet, and it's my computer. Apologies about that. I'm going to have to find a way to switch that off. Over to you, Fiona.
Yeah, that's quite a question, isn't it? So I suspect, I think the first thing to think about, if that was a scenario that somebody experienced, would be, first of all, not to assume anything. So in your scenario that you gave, there was no indication as to who found what. So if, for example, that was a parent who found, the plasters and the tissues and the razor blade, don't assume it's one of your children, for example. Or if it was a child who found those things, don't assume that it's one of your siblings. So, so steering away from assumption would really be for the first port of call, just to really keep an open mind. And I think maybe the next thing to do would be to stay calm. As shocking as finding some of those items would be, stay calm, because if it turns out that there is somebody who's actually self-harming, then their emotions are already heightened. They're already hyper aroused emotionally, and their emotional radar, for want of a better term, is already up, and they're picking up lots of emotions from people already. So somebody approaching them in quite a distressed state is going to only increase their anxiety, which may then cause them to go away and self-harm. So I would say stay calm, and speak to members of the family. If it's a child who's maybe found those things, speak to a parent and say that you found them. If it's a parent who has found it, if you're a wife and you found it, speak to your husband first and have a conversation about how you might address that in the family. Once again, never assume, if you have 2 children or 3 children, never assume, oh, it's that one. Don't do that. Because as I mentioned earlier, self-harm is something that carries a lot of guilt and shame, and it's much more likely that whoever is self-harming is doing it in a very quiet place behind closed doors, and they're going through a lot. Self-harming is not just a way of releasing pent-up emotions, it's also a form of communication. So, you know, that individual is communicating something when they're self-harming. And you know, finding some of those items is a great way to start a conversation, where the person who's self-harming maybe would struggle to find an opening to be able to do that.
Thank you. Apologies, had a bit of technical problem, but I am back. Thank you for that, Fiona, for responding to that to that question. So, just going back to some of the questions that came from our young people, and I'm opening this to the whole panel. When does it move from, okay, we're managing this and we're working with someone to manage, we're respecting their wishes, we put strategies in place, we've looked at all the modalities, Carl, and so forth, that actually we're really, really concerned at what point, one of the young people said, does it escalate into we need to get this person to see some services, or, you know, we're really concerned for the welfare of this individual. And what action would we take as a church?
I've worked
If
with.
I may,
Oh, sorry, go on.
Okay, if we go with Fiona first, and then we'll move to Sylvia.
as a church, I think that's difficult because that's a whole body of people. But I think as a church member, for example, it's about relationships again. And I know I've said it before, but nothing really trumps relationship. Dee talked about, you know, avenues of referral. So, for example, if you found out that your child was self-harming, you could go to your GP. Your GP could make a referral to an appropriate service, a mental health service that could support your child. But even if the child, for example, then starts attending one of the services, they're still coming home to you. So it's about the relationship. So that would really, for me, that would be where I would be supporting, whether you're in the church or outside of the church, it's irrelevant. It's about relationship.
Indeed.
So that would really be the work that I would be looking to do. It would be supporting that parent or that individual to develop different ways of communicating with the self-harmer, so that those pathways become open, and then they can support that individual. And if it's a child, support the child to find different ways of releasing that overwhelming sense of being out of control, because that's what self-harm is. It's a way like overeating, and you know, if you become an alcoholic, you know, that they're all forms of control. So one of the ways that we could work with somebody who was self-harming would be, we could ask them to write or to draw, you know, write down how they're feeling. And if they don't want to show it to you, that's fine, that's their prerogative, but encourage them to write it. And, you know, sometimes I've worked with young people where, you know, once they've written it, there is an option. If they want to read it out loud, they can. If they don't, that's also fine, because it's about control. So we need to empower young people to be able to take control if they're self-harming. But there's also something about them being able to have the controls to then do what they want with whatever they've written or drawn. So, you know, do they want to burn it? Do they want to screw it up and throw it away? it's about facilitating that so that the emotions and what's being built up can be released in a way that's manageable and controllable and safe. Yeah.
No, so thank
Sorry,
you.
Sylvia,
Thank
over
you
to
for
you.
that. Sylvia, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, okay. I think Fiona put it beautifully, and she goes back to relationship. And even in the counselling client, there has to be a relationship there for the actual client to feel safe to talk. Now, you talked about when we do refer, even as a client parent, you have to know your limitations, and you have to know that you come to a place where more support may be needed, especially if it's becoming life threatening. I've worked with one of my clients who had to go to A&E because she'd just gone too far, with it, where psychiatrists and other people were able to help her and intervene and that. And then later on, she came back to counselling. But you have to know your limitations on how far you can actually support, and know that there are other services, and especially when it becomes, like I said, life threatening to that person. And also, and I'll probably go back, we can't really get away from the relational side of things as well, because as Fiona said, as Carlos said, that nobody's just going to come and talk to you and tell you this, that, and the other if you've never had a relationship with a particular person. So the relationship is very, very, very important, and being able to refer is also very important as well, understanding your limitations in this. I suppose as well that before we approach anybody, I think it's good to reflect on how our own personal feelings regarding self-harm. And I mean, how exactly do I feel about this? Will it get in the way of communicating with this person? Am I able to actually talk in a non-judgmental way so that this person's able to feel safe and to actually share, their concerns?
Thank you so much, Sylvia. There was one thing that I really wanted to bring a perspective around the family, because we've focused a lot on the individual, the child, the person who's self-harming. How do we work with the whole family? Because the child is part of a system, and and maybe part of the triggers for the child self-harming is within the context of the family. And I just wondered if anybody had a perspective around how we work with families in this area. Dee, shall I come to you?
Yes, there is an organisation that it's a support group for parents and families of children who self-harm.
Okay.
That could
Thank
be
you,
found
Dee.
on Google. I'll try and find that and I'll send that to you so we can add it onto at the end.
Mm, mm. So in the context of your work, you obviously work with the individual. What about the wider family? Do you work with the parents? Do you work with the context of? Do you work with the family as well as the individual? And how Yeah, as a what approach should the family take? And I think sometimes there must be like maybe guilt in the family as well about what's happening, and maybe there's embarrassment, there's shame. How do you work within the context of the family? Fiona, can I direct this question to you?
Yeah. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you mentioned that earlier that there may be, what if maybe the root cause of a young person self-harming is because of the family dynamics. So there is something taking place in the family that might be fueling, one of the children or the siblings self-harming. That's a little trickier, because then that's not necessarily something that the young person has done that they're carrying. That's something that is being done, and is, for want of a better term, acceptable in the family.
Mm,
So it becomes
mm,
a lot harder for that child to then talk about it. So, for example, if the
mm,
parents are arguing, and the arguing, the voices are raised, and that can be very scary for some children, for especially younger children. They may feel that that they're very the fabric of their existence in the home is being threatened, because the two people who they look to keep them safe, provide shelter, food, clothing, warmth, love, are not able to do that for them. That's how they're interpreting what they're seeing and what they're hearing and what they're experiencing. So a fear may well develop within the child, because the behavior they see mummy and daddy expressing to one another, who, in the next breath or the next day, they're hearing, oh yes, mummy does love daddy, but then later on that evening, there's this blazing row. How do you reconcile that being love and me feeling frightened? And who do I go to talk to about how I'm feeling? So family dynamics can be really complex, and it can be really difficult to know what to do, both as the child and as the parent. But I think there is something around kind of parents have obviously parents have to take responsibility, and that's so much easier said than done when you as a parent are in the middle of these dynamics, and it's sometimes very difficult to take yourself out of the picture and just kind of take a look at what's happening in the family, because you yourself are in pain and you're struggling, and maybe you haven't even processed some of what you're going through, to then really think about the children. And once again, because self-harm is one of those things that's done in secret, unless there are signs, unless you're vigilant, it's going to be really difficult to kind of acknowledge what's going on, and then maybe even have the tools to address it. So there is something about just kind of recognizing that that children do pick up, not just on what you teach them, they pick up on everything that you do. So what you say, they hear. What you don't say, they interpret. And if you are behaving in a way that you yourself are not really happy with, understand that your children will interpret that in a very negative way, and some children will take that on board. Some children will, in terms of their interpretation, they may think that they're the cause of that. That if for example, and I'm just using the example of arguing parents, they may feel that they're the cause of it. So then that fear and that anxiety becomes internalized, and that's when the self-harming then comes in. So I think for parents, it's just about really being aware of who you are in front of your children, what you say, how you behave, because children won't just learn what you teach them; they'll learn everything from you. And that's part of parenthood. They will learn how to deal with conflict based on how you deal with conflict. And if what you present is something that they can't interpret in a way that's positive, then unfortunately they will go with with something negative, and as I say, they can internalize that. So yeah, it's a tricky one. It's really quite tricky. It's tricky. Dee's already mentioned kind of looking at different avenues. So there are counselling services that parents can go to if they recognise that they're in a bit of a rut themselves, and you know, between them they can't figure it out. There are counselling services like Relate, and Relate's available around the country as far as I'm aware. And I think more localized in regions, there might be other services that your GP or health centre may be more aware of. You can always contact them and find out what's available. But yeah, I think anything that kind of generates anxiety in you as a parent, bet your life it's generating anxiety in your children as well.
No, thank you for that. In thinking about this topic, I've been having conversations with people. I've just said, you know, we've got this talk program around self-harm, and I was, you know, surprised just in having that conversation that it opened up. Quite a few people said to me, my children self-harmed, and you know how distressing it was for them as a parent, and you know they just didn't know what to do. And one person said that, you know, the school, you know, it was it because the schools are part of the that system, that building relationships with the school, but she felt the school were not coming forward with information. That might be for all sorts of reasons, and that's just kind of an anecdotal. But it just made me think about the who else is in that system, that we need to just remember and communicate with and connect with.
Can I come in, Joyce? Because I think that
Yes,
it's
Carl.
what you mentioned, you mentioned systems a few times, and it's spot on, because I think it's systemic family therapy that is necessary, to look at the system of the family. And what Fiona shared there was rich and comprehensive, and looking at how that system operates in full, and having honest conversations with the whole family, because what we're describing and talking about is it's generational, and as a consequence, what the parents may have experienced has come from their own parents, and it follows. We know it follows through families, and family histories, and history tending to repeat itself. And so, as a consequence of today, and we know how fast-paced this world is today in which we live, kids today, they've taken it to the next level. So they find other people who are like-minded, who will support their self-harming, on these different platforms and forums, and they've just taken it to a next level. So we need to get the family involved in it holistically, so that they'll be able to talk about it honestly, without removing those barriers, because that's another area, just removing the barriers. And in the first instance, it is about the parents admitting that there is something. I need to take responsibility for this, and that's hard. And quite often it's hard for them to do. But it is about being honest with yourself.
Yes, I think it's a tough one.
Yes.
Pauline, I'm mindful of time, and I'm thinking that it would be helpful to just go around the panel and, what would be your takeaway message or your last message that you'd want to give to the listeners that are listening today. But before I ask that question, I'm going to ask Pauline, in case there's something burning that she wants to ask, before we start to summarize and wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's been an insightful evening. I think the issue of self-harming, it's more systemic than we're led to believe. I've got some stats here from the research that Joyce and I did. And just to sort of elaborate on Carl's point that it's an all-age thing. So NICE, which is the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, it's a national body that gives guidance on health and social care. They produced a report, and the figures are quite interesting. The proportion of people, sorry if I lose eye contact, it's because I'm reading this. The proportion of people age 16 to 74 were reported to have self-harm. Now this increased, this was taken in 2000, that was about 2.4%. In 2007, that increased to 3.8%, and 2014, that increased to 6.4%. So your 16 to 17 to 74-year-olds, we can see that it is a phenomenon, and it's not just a young person thing, which has been quite eye-opening for us. So just to reinforce the point that if there was a misconception about who self-harm, then we can see from tonight's discussion and exploration that it covers a wide range of people. So I guess just reinforcing that point, Joyce, that it is an all-age issue.
Thank you, Pauline. And I think the other point, and I'm not sure if I missed it, Fiona, when you were speaking, is we've talked about self-harm in terms of cutting. Carl, I think you mentioned burning, but there are other types of self-harm, ways people actually harm themselves, and that's another area to be aware of. I may have missed it, Fiona. I'm not sure if it came through, but conscious of time, what we want people to go away with hope and approaches if they're a parent or a youth worker. What are the kind of top two things from each of you? We're going to go around quite quickly now, that you would want a parting message for people to go away with. So I'm going to start with Sylvia, Carl, Dee, and then Fiona. And we're going to 2 seconds each.
Okay, 2 seconds. If you've been on this platform and you have been triggered in any way, please talk to somebody. Don't keep it to yourself. There is a helpline that's going across the screen, or find somebody that you feel safe to talk to this situation about. There is help out there, and there are people who do want to help you.
I would say my parting message would be to ask for help. That's the main thing. That you are not alone. That there is someone out there that can help you to eradicate this from your life.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you. I would say my parting message is to say to keep communication with the child open, not to show any anger, but just show love and acknowledgement of any difficult emotions that the child is feeling.
Thank you, Dee. Over to Fiona.
I would say, you did say two, Joyce. I'm going to say them really quickly. So my first one would be to recognize that self-harming has been around from biblical times. There's a scripture, and I can't reference it right now, that talks about, the Baal worshippers, when the prophet said, where's your God? And they got to the point where they were calling their God so much and he just didn't show up. So they started cutting themselves because they were so stressed. The fact that their God didn't exist is neither here or there. The fact is that they were harming themselves. So from way back in scripture, we have references of people doing that. To this day, it's not just a young people phenomenon. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, people were overeating, over drinking, abusing, substances, and it's still going on. And I think it was Carl who said that young people have just taken it to the next level. So self-harm is something that has always been with us. So I would just say, just really be aware that all ages do it. And my second point would be, find somebody, trust one person. Find one person and trust one person and share it with. You only need one. So find one person.
Thank you so much to our panel for tonight. Sylvia, Carl, Dee, and Fiona, you've been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much
Thank you
for your contribution tonight. We could not have done this program without you, and I'm sure for those watching and for those that might watch later, that people's lives will be enriched and enlightened by some of the things that you said, and it might save someone, and thank you for some of your thought, your preparation, thoughtfulness, and just how you've come across tonight. I think it's been absolutely amazing, so thank you. Pauline and I are going to do a bit of a summary now. Don't leave us. We will see you shortly after the program, but we're just going to be a bit of a summary now, Pauline and I, on the evening. So Pauline, how do you think the evening went, Pauline? I think you were absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Do you know something? I think I liked the pace of this evening. I liked how the panelists, they presented the topic without the emotion and drama around it. And I think that can only help people that are experiencing, and it's not so much those, it is as much as those that are experiencing self-harm, but those that maybe are slightly removed from it and they know of somebody that's self-harming. And I think what tonight did, it gave a really good context of reality of what's happening. We heard what's happening in the pews. We heard about relationships parents have with their children in all this. We know that it's not a phenomenon just amongst young people and adolescents. But I liked what Fiona said. This has been around from time, under another name, under another banner. And it's quite interesting. Contemporary life has a way of renaming and rebranding certain social phenomena. But I'm really grateful for the panel, how they presented themselves. And I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to sit side by side with you. But I think bottom line for me is, do you know when Christ left, he did a depiction of 100 sheep, 99 were left, one was sought out because they went astray. Even if tonight was about impacting one individual,
Yes.
It says a lot, because one person matters, doesn't it? All souls matter. And for those that may, I told you I could talk for England, didn't I? So stop me when I need to stop. Yeah. So, and you know what's quite phenomenal? All the answers are in scripture. You know,
Yes.
Bible talks about renewing mind, finding strength in the renewing of the mind. And we joked a bit about, how I was brought up, and it wasn't all bad. There was very positive things about my upbringing, but there was this notion of you don't speak, you don't articulate yourself, and so forth. That wasn't always around. And I think what young people are experiencing now, this generation, is the opportunity to open up and talk. And I think Christ, again, he sets that example, doesn't he, Joyce, when he said, he could have just said to the disciples, I'm the Christ, full stop. But what he did with Peter, he took the opportunity to explore, what were you actually thinking, Peter, about who I am? And I think so it is that strategy of giving individuals the opportunity to express themselves, to explore. It creates an environment where individuals can feel comfortable approaching mum and dad or a significant other, can speak to somebody in church. I think for the church to be relevant, we need to continue addressing these issues. And I like how the Connect series, there doesn't seem to be anything that's off the table. And that's really encouraging. We're tackling those issues. And just give a shout out to the National Planning Committee as well, the team of us that work together to put these programs, thoughts on paper, then to actually have them happen. Just want to say a huge thank you to those that are supporting you in this process. Thanks, Joy.
A huge thank you to you, Pauline. Thank you so much. We couldn't have got this particular program off the ground without your support, and a lot of the background work and pulling all the strands together is down to you. So thank you so much. And thank you to our planning team, as you said, the National Women's regional directors, and all those that contribute, our PA, because it is a lot of work each month, and we want to bring something fresh, we want to bring something new, and we are thinking about different ways of delivering this in a different way, slightly different way, particularly since we've kind of come out of lockdown. So we are working on that. So we want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to thank the team. We want to thank our technical team and technical director, Pastor Errol. And thank you to all of you that have listened. And please like, share, follow us. We're on Twitter, Joyce Fletcher 20. Follow us. And just share this video, because if it touches one person's life, if it touches one family, it will make a difference. So we want to close out with just sharing a PowerPoint of all the different services that you can tap into, and we will scroll sentient. So this is just sharing some further information about, if we scroll up on that, all the different Childline, 0800 111 111, that's always open. And the website includes online counselling, crisis text line, text home to 85258 for a trained crisis counsellor 24/7. There's Hope Line, and that's a line to call if you're having suicidal thoughts, 0800 068 4141. COOS, which is a free, safe and anonymous online support for young people, and that's Monday to Friday from noon to 10 p.m. and Saturday and Sundays between 6 and 10 p.m. And Mermaids, 0808 801 0400, and that's supporting transgender youth, their family and professionals working with them. And of course, our very own sentient counselling service that you can contact using the email sentient@cogot.org.uk or 358 8600. And there are some other services that we've put up. Of course, there's the police if you think situations getting dangerous. There's the Samaritans that's always open, and the numbers there 116 123. There's Shout. You can text Shout, which is a free text service for anyone that's in crisis. And of course, Young Minds Crisis Messenger, and that again, that's another text and 24/7 crisis support. And Young Minds Parent Helpline number is there. And of course, in every area you will have a child and adolescent mental health service. CAMS is, you'll hear it referred to as CAMS. If you get in touch, if you've got concern, raise your concerns with the school as well. So we want to close out with a wonderful song that we think is appropriate for the conversation and the topic that we've had, and it's sung by the Reading in the Wells Women's Ministries choir group, and they're going to sing us out with this beautiful melody as we close out tonight. God bless you all, and thank you for joining us.
Lord bless you and keep you, and make His face shine upon you, be gracious to you. The Lord turn His face toward you and give you peace. Amen. 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 Face towards you, and give, we sing. So let it be. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, your children, and their children, and their children. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you and within you. He is with you, He is with you, He is with you. In the morning, in the evening, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, He is for you. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, He is with you. In the morning, in your coming, in your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, He is for you, He is for you. You are for us, 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 you are for us. We sing it. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you. He is in the morning, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you. He is for you. He is for you. He is for you. We sing, oh Jesus. We speak blessings over you. Amen. Amen. In the name of Jesus. So let it be. So let it be. So let it be. Amen. We sing from the depths of our heart. Jesus speaks blessings over you. 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 Father, in the name of Jesus, we speak blessings over everyone that's hearing the sound of my voice, hearing the sound of my voice. Blessings over you, blessings over you, blessings over you. Hallelujah. In the name of Jesus, we say, so let it be. We sing, so let it be. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Jesus. The Lord is for you. The Lord is with you. He won't let you down. He won't let you down. Oh, amen. We seal it with the blood of Jesus. We seal your blessings with the blood of Jesus. Amen.